Machine quilting with arc-shaped rulers is not only fun, you can also use them to create some pretty amazing designs. Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from quiltingismytherapy.com, and welcome to this machine quilting video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you the basics of quilting with arc-shaped rulers on your sewing machine, and I promise it's probably easier than you think. In our upcoming Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series, I'm going to be showing you how to quilt with arcs and curved rulers to create some pretty amazing designs. But before we can use arced rulers to create stunning designs, you're going to have to learn how to quilt with them. I like quilting with arc-shaped rulers because they help me create those nice longer curves, which I really struggle with quilting just free motion. But just like with every shape of ruler, there's a ton of different options out there. For instance, here we have the Smiley ruler, which I designed with Creative Grids. It has two different sized arcs on either side of the ruler, and those needle stops that make it nice and easy to reposition. But you can also find concave rulers like this, where you're quilting along the inside of the curve. Or you might find something bigger still that gives you two different shapes on either side of it. These are all great for creating really cool designs. I think looking for a ruler that's about the size of your hand is a great starting point. It won't be too big to use, but you can still get a lot of versatility out of them. And you can find any of these rulers on our website. All you have to do is click the link in the description box below. Well, I'm gonna grab my Smiley ruler, grab my sewing machine, and we're gonna get to quilting. Quilting along your arc rulers on a sewing machine doesn't have to be tricky, but there are a couple things that you have to consider as you're quilting. First of all, I have my ruler foot on my machine. It's a higher profile foot that prevents the ruler from sliding over it, which is really nice. It helps keep it in place. I've got my extended base and I have my Supreme slider, so both of those are going to make the quilting a little bit easier. Once you're ready to start quilting, you're going to position the ruler where it is you want to quilt along it. For now, we're going to play around with some different positioning just so you can kind of see the difference. But once I have that ruler positioned where I want to start quilting, I'm going to place one hand on my ruler and one hand on the other side of the foot. Now, one thing you can probably notice right off the bat is my ruler is on the left side. That's how I prefer to quilt. I like to have my ruler on the left side and my other hand over here. However, you can switch it up. If you want, you can work from the other side of your foot. It just depends on what you find more comfortable. But no matter what side of the foot you have your ruler, you need to remember that you have most control when you have your hands on both sides of the foot. I don't want both hands over here. I don't want both hands over there. I want one on each side. Once I'm ready to start quilting, I'm going to press my pedal and the machine's going to start quilting. Then it's up to me to move the quilt so that the foot stays close to that ruler. Now, one thing we have to think about is as that foot makes its way around the ruler, the point of contact is going to change. At this point, it's on the side of the foot. But as I come down here, it's going to work its way more towards the bottom. So really knowing where that foot is going to touch the ruler is really going to help you be aware of it as you're quilting along. So once I'm ready to start quilting, I'm going to press the pedal and begin quilting along the ruler. Now, if you're newer to machine quilting with rulers, this might feel a little weird. It feels like you have a different kind of appendage over here, and that's totally fine. You're gonna get more comfortable with that the more practice that you have. But one thing I wanna point out is as I'm quilting along my rulers, I never want the foot of my machine to be further than my fingertips. That means I don't want to quilt something like this. The foot is way up here and my hand is way down here. Not only is that going to give me poor control of the ruler and end up with some wobbly lines, it could also make the ruler lift up a little bit, and that's where you can get in trouble running it into your needle, so we don't want to do that. As you're working along your arc rulers, stop and reposition your hands. For some reason, we get in our head that we have to quilt this whole arc without pausing, and that is not true. You can stop, you can shake out your hands, you can have a breath, take a drink of your piecing potion, whatever you need to do, and then resume quilting. And notice, as I'm quilting along that arc, I'm beginning to get past my fingertip, so I need to reposition my hands and then continue. If you only remember one pointer from this video, remember that. You want the foot of the machine in between your fingertips. Now, once you get to the end of the arc, then you can reposition it or rotate it or do whatever it is that you want to create the different designs you're working on. For right now, we're going to work our way down the other side by switching that ruler around and coming back to where we started. But one thing I want to point out is when you're quilting on a sewing machine, you have the ability to change the orientation of your quilt. You might find that you do a better job quilting vertically with your arcs, especially on the left side. In that case, it's easy to rotate the quilt, reposition my ruler, and then work my way that way. A lot of quilting, and a lot of ruler quilting specifically, is just knowing what works for you and your preferences. So do not be afraid to rotate that quilt, especially in the beginning. Now, once you get the hang of it and you can do it super easily, then you don't have to worry about it. But for now, let's make it as easy as possible. Another thing I want to point out is I prefer working vertically. The reason I like to do that is I feel like I have more momentum or more push behind my arms. But one of the drawbacks is I can't always see where I'm going. Some quilters might find it easier to quilt in a horizontal manner. One of the benefits to that is I can see exactly where I'm going. One of the drawbacks is sometimes I don't have enough room to fit that ruler in there. So you kind of have to play around with that and find what works for you. Now in this example, if I wanted to quilt horizontally, the ruler is going to be behind the foot of the machine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the easiest way to go about it. So let's turn the quilt around. Now my ruler is going to be in front of my foot, and that's going to make it a little bit easier for me to quilt. And when you're quilting with rulers, the reference lines are going to be your best friend. They're really going to help you reposition that ruler easily. They're going to help you keep your designs straight along the quilt, and every ruler has different reference lines. I've designed Smiley so that these reference lines right here line up with my previously quilted line. And that's how I'm making sure that it's in the right spot. Even though I'm going to be quilting this horizontally, I still need to remember that I have control when the foot of the machine is in between my fingertips. So as I work my way along, I'm going to stop and reposition my hands. Another thing that's going to happen is as I'm quilting, the ruler is going to shift to the other side of the foot. At that point, I need to stop and move my hands so that I still have my hands on both sides of the foot. So I'm kind of handing it off as I make my way around that curve. And now I'm to that point where I'm getting ready to quilt past my fingertips. I'm going to reposition my hand and then continue on. Now I designed Smiley so that it had needle stops on both sides. What that does is it makes it really clear where to stop and makes it really fast and easy to reposition the ruler, especially if I'm making arc shapes like this where I want the points at the end. While not every ruler has those needle stops, you can still get that nice sharp point with them. For example, let's look at this Crescent ruler from Handi Quilter. It has that nice arc on one side and a shallower arc on the other, and it ends in the points. Quilting along it is going to be the same as a Smiley ruler. I'm going to position it in place, work my way along that curve until I get to the bottom, pausing and repositioning my hands as necessary. And I'm going to keep going till I get to the very, very bottom of that arc where I can't go any further without running off of the ruler. I'm going to stop and reposition it to the other side. Again, I've rotated the quilt to make it a little bit easier so I can quilt from the side of the foot that I prefer to quilt from. But as you get better at that, you can just work from both sides of the foot. When I'm quilting with rulers on a sewing machine, I can't forget the other hand. Sometimes I get so focused on the hand that's holding the ruler that I forget about this one over here. Even though I'm not holding a ruler in this hand, it's still helping me move that quilt sandwich. So make sure you press down with both hands and try to move as smoothly as you can along that ruler. As I start to make my way back to that starting point, I have to remember that I need about 1/4 of an inch between the edge of the ruler and the needle of the foot. That means if I position my ruler so that's right on that end, I'm actually going to end up about 1/4 inch away. So I'm going to back the ruler up so I can see about 1/4 inch spacing right there. Especially in the beginning, I wouldn't worry too much about all your points matching up, but as you get more comfortable with rulers, you're going to have to remember that pesky 1/4 inch. And just for fun, I'm going to put a smaller petal shape in here by positioning my ruler and then quilting along that curve. As I quilt beyond my fingertips, I'm going to have less control of my ruler and it's not going to look quite as good. So I need to stop and reposition my hands and continue on. Quilting with rulers is definitely going to be a little bit slower than your other free motion designs, and that's totally fine. Just take your time, work along that ruler, and continue on. Once you get more comfortable quilting with these rulers, you can start trying to quilt on both sides of the foot. Even though I find quilting along the left side of the foot easier, knowing how to switch it up and use both sides is going to make it a lot more efficient when it comes to quilting on bigger quilts. Now here's a couple more tips that might make quilting with arc rulers a little bit easier. First up, if you find that your ruler is moving around a lot and you're really struggling to keep it in place, you can add some extra grip on the back of them. The rulers I designed with Creative Grids already has a grip on the back. This grip helps that ruler stay in place and helps me get those nice arcs. But if your ruler doesn't have that, you can add extra grip on the back. There's several products that do this. There's Handi Grip, there's ruler tape, anything like that. Another tip that might make it a little easier for you is be sure that you're sitting up high enough at your machine. As you're quilting along rulers and moving the bulk of the quilt, it's gonna be a little tricky. And if I'm sitting too low, I'm gonna get what I call T-Rex arms, right? My arms are gonna be up here. No, instead, I wanna be up enough so I can push down on the ruler and the fabric and move in that motion. Sometimes gravity can be helpful. And if the ruler does slide or the line's not perfect, it's fine. We're not using rulers to create perfect quilting. There's no such thing as perfection in free motion quilting. So even if that line moves a little bit or the points don't match up quite right, Once the whole quilt is finished and I step back, it's gonna look fine. And I know I've said it before, but I'm gonna say it again. The main tip here is to find what positioning works for you. You might prefer working in a vertical motion from the right side of your foot, or you might prefer working horizontally from behind the foot. There's no wrong way to do this, but try all the different positions because I promise one of them is gonna feel a little bit easier than the rest. Once you've practiced with the arc rulers and you get a little bit more comfortable with it, there are so many different ways that you can use this ruler to create designs on your quilts. You can use them to break up bigger areas of background space by quilting those arcs and filling in the areas with other designs. You can use them for curved echoing or curved crosshatch. Try using them to create continuous curved designs in bigger squares. You can combine them with other rulers to create more interesting shapes for background areas of your quilt, or you can rotate them to create motifs. Quilting with arc rulers is a lot of fun and probably easier than you think, but it does take a little bit of practice. So don't get discouraged. Keep practicing and trying those arc rulers, and I guarantee you, soon you'll be a ruler quilting ninja. Now it's your turn. Go ahead and grab that arc-shaped ruler and try quilting along it in all different directions. The goal here is not to create complex looking designs. The goal here is for you to get comfortable with using that ruler so that in the upcoming video series, I can show you how to create those designs. And to learn more about the arcs, curves, and points with rulers, free motion challenge quilting along video series, all you have to do is click the link in the description box below or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. And if you have any questions about quilting with arc rulers on your sewing machine, just leave them in the comments below. And I'll be back soon with another machine quilting tutorial. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.